In November of 2021, I was on my way to a jiu-jitsu tournament in Las Vegas. As someone who traveled frequently for competitions, I often relied on staying with teammates to save money. However, this time I had to go solo, and I decided to book an Airbnb. The Airbnb I found was not in the best neighborhood, but I was in a hurry, and it seemed close to where I needed to be. It was a small studio apartment sharing a wall with the host's house, with only one door in and out. The first red flag was the lock code for the door, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It seemed strange, but I brushed it off, assuming the host might not be tech-savvy. I arrived at the location and realized I had no idea what the host even looked like. Their profile picture was a generic flower. The unease started to settle in, but I pushed my instincts aside, telling myself it was just a place to sleep. Things took a dark turn around 9:30 p.m. when I was almost asleep. I heard a tapping on the window in front of my bed, but the drapes blocked my view of the outside. "Huh?" I called out, trying to signal that I was aware of the noise. It went silent for a moment before the tapping resumed. I decided to be more assertive and said loudly, "Hello?" It stopped again. My nerves were on edge, and I decided to message the host, thinking it was them outside the window. After an hour of waiting for a response, they finally replied, claiming they had come to bring me water but assumed I was asleep, so they left. I couldn't shake off the unease, and I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. I thought about going out for a walk or taking a shower to clear my mind, but something told me to stay put. About 45 minutes later, around midnight, I heard someone outside trying to use the key code on my door. The lock disengaged, and the door began to open toward me. In a rush of adrenaline, I yanked the door shut, screaming at the person on the other side to leave. A deep voice responded. Madel said, "This is my room." But Madel was the host's name, and I insisted it was my room. I called the police, who arrived and took my side. The host was unapologetic and changed their alibi multiple times. I left in an Uber, relieved to escape that eerie place. I never saw the person who tried to enter my room, but I suspected it might have been a setup. If the host knew I was coming from the East Coast, their sinister plans might have been far worse than just a robbery. In the summer of 2016, my boyfriend Sean and I decided to embark on a trip to Vermont, looking for a rustic adventure. We stumbled upon an intriguing off-grid cabin listed on Airbnb with hundreds of 5-star reviews, and we eagerly booked it. The cabin itself was an old one-room wooden structure with a cozy potbelly stove and a loft area. It was located in a remote part of Vermont, down a winding dirt road. About half a mile away stood the host's house, but she was away during our stay, leaving us alone in the wilderness. We arrived at the cabin around 4 p.m. and enjoyed a lovely evening cooking dinner and playing board games by the gentle glow of candlelight. Having hiked all day, we were exhausted and retired to bed at around 10 p.m. I climbed up to the loft to sleep, while Sean decided to sit outside and enjoy a late-night smoke. I was in that hazy space between wakefulness and slumber when I was jolted awake by a thunderous banging sound against the cabin's wooden walls. Before I could react, Sean yelled up from below, asking if the noise came from me. Confused and half awake, I groggily replied that it wasn't me, and Sean didn't seem overly concerned. We assumed it was probably a fallen tree branch that had struck the cabin, a common occurrence in wooded areas. As I began drifting back to sleep, the eerie banging sound returned. Only this time, it seemed to originate from a different part of the cabin. Startled, I jumped out of bed and descended from the loft to meet Sean at the door. He instructed me to gather any sharp objects I could find and then return to the loft. While he put on a brave front, I could sense he was increasingly worried. We had camped together often, but this was different. I asked him what he thought was causing the noises, and he cautiously admitted that he didn't know. He also thought he might have heard footsteps earlier. Whispering, we both froze. when a slow, deliberate scraping noise began emanating from the outside wall of the cabin. Our surroundings fell into silence once more. This is where our fear heightened. The noises grew louder, resembling someone dragging a rake or a hoe against the cabin's wooden surface. We heard footsteps, constant methodical footsteps circling the cabin with a clear crunch-crunch of one foot in front of the other. There were intervals of eerie silence, lasting 10 to 20 minutes, before the cacophony resumed. At one point, a rattling sound emerged, as if someone was trying to shake or climb the pipe connected to the potbelly stove on the outside of the cabin. It went on for hours, and Sean and I lay frozen in the bed, staring at each other in terror. It must have been around midnight by then, and the relentless noise convinced us we were trapped inside the cabin until morning. We kept expecting the front door to burst open or the window screens to be torn apart. Thoughts of a gruesome end raced through my mind. Yet the night passed and no one entered the cabin. We never heard voices, whispers, or laughter, just those dreadful sounds. Around 5 a.m., the distant crowing of roosters signaled the dawn. With the first rays of light, the noises ceased. I managed to catch a couple of hours of restless sleep. Once daylight broke, we quickly packed our belongings to leave the cabin. Sean inspected for any signs of scraping marks or clear footprints, but there was nothing. We contacted the Airbnb host, informing her of our harrowing experience. Her casual response was that it might have been a porcupine. However, neither of us was convinced. We still debate what could have lurked in the darkness. Sean believes it may have been a local attempting to scare us off, but I can't help but wonder if something more sinister had paid us a visit. In the vast expanse of the Arizona desert, I found myself in the midst of an inexplicable and unsettling experience. It all began during a trip for a job interview that led me to book a seemingly innocuous Airbnb in a remote corner of the state. The desert landscape stretched out before me, a desolate beauty that felt both isolating and fascinating. I arrived at the Airbnb, a small, unassuming house in the middle of nowhere, my only sanctuary in this barren landscape. On the first night, as the moon cast eerie shadows across the landscape, I was startled by faint taps on my window. The taps were irregular, more like someone lightly grazing the glass with their fingers than the typical sounds of nature. Nervously, I approached the window but saw nothing beyond it, just the darkness of the desert stretching into infinity. Chalking it up to nerves, I returned to bed and attempted to sleep, but unease lingered. It wasn't until the following evening that I was jolted awake by a fresh wave of dread. A person in dark clothing stood at the window, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. Panic gripped me as I locked eyes with this mysterious figure, seemingly observing my every move. My heart raced as I realized that I was not alone. Summoning my courage, I rushed to the front door and flung it open, determined to confront the intruder. But to my astonishment, the figure swiftly disappeared into the desolate desert, leaving no trace behind. The night swallowed them whole, and I was left shivering on the doorstep. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Who was this person, and why had they been watching me from the shadows? I knew that I couldn't stay in this ominous place any longer. As I pondered my next move, I began to hear clicking sounds emanating from my closet. The clicks were unnatural, like someone repeatedly making a sound by clicking their tongue at the roof of their mouth. They came from inside the closet, beyond the closed door. Fear gnawed at my gut, urging me to flee. I grabbed my phone, dashed outside to my car, and sat there, trembling, gazing back at the house that had harbored such mysterious occurrences. Summoning the courage to make a call, I contacted the local police. I remained in the car, my heart pounding as I waited for their arrival. It felt like an eternity, but eventually the red and blue flashing lights of a police cruiser pierced the darkness. The officers conducted a thorough search of the house and its surroundings, but found no trace of the mysterious intruder. They advised me to leave and provided an escort back to civilization, ensuring my safety. When I contacted the Airbnb host about the eerie events, she seemed unnaturally nonchalant and dismissive. Her indifferent demeanor only deepened my suspicions. Was she involved, or was there something more sinister at play here? As I left the haunting desert behind, the questions surrounding those eerie nights continued to gnaw at me. To this day, the mysterious encounters I experienced in that Arizona Airbnb remain shrouded in an enigmatic darkness.